Welcome to Ultimate Life Now with Dr. Alan Pickering.
Welcome to Ultimate Life Now. I'm Dr. Alan Pickering, your host for this show. And today we're going to be talking about marriage, one of the most challenging relationships on the face of this earth, and I should also say one of the most humbling experiences. It's challenging because you have two unique individuals who are very complicated backgrounds, complicated temperament, personalities, coming together for what's supposed to be an ideal relationship. But because of our flaws, which is one of the variables in a relationship, the relationship doesn't quite go as well as most people expect. And statistically, there's a lot of research on what happens in relationships. About 20% of marriages, 1 out of 5, say that they're happy in the relationship. 25% of couples end in divorce. One stat goes as high as 64% ending in divorce. So there's a lot of challenges to this relationship, and a lot of relationships are ending because people are not getting what they need to help them in this relationship. So today we're going to unpack this subject of marriage with a couple that I have here with us in this studio, Robert and Lauri Simmons. They both own and operate a leading life coaching and leadership services. Robert is an operations business consultant coach for Baylor Scott and White Care System. He's a retired Master Sergeant in the U.S. Marines. He has an MBA in marketing, a BS in management, and he is a certified executive professional coach from UT Dallas School of Management. And Lauri is an entrepreneur herself. She actually owns 2 businesses, Frosty Rebel and Get Real, and she is a certified lay counselor through the American Association of Christian Counselors. And together, they do marriage mentoring through Ultimate Life Now and through the High Ridge Church in Fort Worth. Welcome, Robert and Lauri, to our program.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Great to have you guys. Tell our audience how we got together, how we connected.
Well, it was a much different look than it is today, I'll tell you that. When we first contacted you, we were in a very tough spot. It was a spot that we didn't think we would ever be in a marriage. At the time, we'd been married about 26 years, and we had walked away from the Lord, walked away from the church, and at the time, our marriage was in shambles. It wasn't where it needed to be by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I remember that time with you guys, and we started working together. We took our time to analyze everything, and eventually we saw some breakthroughs for you guys, and we actually did a ceremony, kind of remarrying you guys back together in a renewed relationship, and that was probably one of the most beautiful experiences I've had with a couple, and it kind of jump-started you into even a greater era of relationship, and today, it's amazing that God is using you to affect other couples. Tell me about some of the mentoring you're doing with couples.
Right. Well, Lauri's done a ton. I have to bring her out on this one because she started working immediately with other ladies who were having struggles in their own relationships. And of course we use your material to help walk through that. But then of course at High Ridge Church last year we had the opportunity to start mentoring some young couples. We had one young couple who was on the verge of getting married, and they were going to be a blended families, and they wanted to do it right this time, so they were teeing the ball up.
Right.
And then we had another young couple who were just new in their marriage, and all the couples who took part in that just walked out with a totally new perspective on marriage and relationships. I think that strengthened them in a big way.
Lauri, tell us about some experiences you had in helping couples to, grow in the relationship and to refine things.
Yeah, it's working with Ultimate Life. Now I got to speak with a lot of women who were having marriage difficulties and walking them through knowing that they can't change their spouse. That's because right. A lot of times, you want to, everybody comes in, well, this person's doing this person's doing that, but instead refocusing that attention more on yourself and what can I change about me that will make the relationship better.
Yeah, that's an important point, Lauri, because, for a ball team to get better, the player has to get better. A ball team is not going to get better unless the players get better. So if the ball player gets better, the team gets better. So if the spouse gets better, the marriage gets better.
Exactly.
And you both have discovered that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's it really is about focusing in on yourself and where am I in the relationship and what am I doing that is not healthy or is not, making us a good couple? What can I do better to be a better me? Who is God calling me to be in this relationship?
Critical.
And who does He want me to be, personally through this? So, and that takes the focus off of the other person and puts it solely on yourself, which pulls, like you said, it pulls it to another level of making the relationship much better.
Yeah, when I work with couples, I've discovered that it kind of shakes out in three major categories. And these actually were three categories that I focus in with you guys. And it boils down to these three. Values. There's 74 core values. Now there's hundreds of peripheral values, like how you squeeze a toothpaste, but core values, like how you handle finances, religion, faith, how you raise children. Those are core values. And when couples line up in core values, they generally have a very good relationship with each other. So I do a values evaluation in that book. I think I did the values evaluation with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second is temperament. That's kind of how you roll as a human being. You have your personality, and then personality style is also called temperament. And we have to look at how healthy or unhealthy a couple is in temperament. And so testing out is real important. And of course, I tested you guys out with the Taylor Johnson temperament analysis. So that's a critical aspect in a relationship. And then skills, interpersonal relationship skills. I mean, you can love to fly a plane, but if you don't have certain skills, you're going down. And especially if there's a storm, you're really going to go down. So we have to look at how skilled you are, interpersonal relationship skills as far as each person is concerned. There's 8 of those major skills, and most people don't realize there's 2 levels. There's a level 1 that's relating to people out there, Mo, Larry, and Curly. Then there's a level 2, and that's relating to a spouse, and that's a far more challenging relationship, a level 2 relationship relating to a spouse. So these are the 3 biggies as I have discovered. So what are the kind of the particular issues that in your work with couples that really come up to the surface, that are at the forefront, major issues that you find couples have with each other in this relationship? So Robert and then Lauri.
All right. Well, I found that, number one, kind of what Lauri said, they're always focused on the other person. They don't focus on themselves quite as much. And something else I found out is that we live in a society of just quit.
Yeah.
If I can maybe I'll find something better. And folks don't realize that God's writing a story in our lives. And I couldn't imagine, but could you imagine writing a book and just stopping halfway through a chapter and jumping to the next chapter? And I think with our society now, so inwardly focused and so much looking for what satisfies me, as soon as things get rough, as soon as the Titanic hits that iceberg, they want to change the channel. Whereas if they would just stay in there and let God keep writing that story, it turns out to be something incredibly magnificent.
Yeah, there's a tremendous book that's been written about how marriage is not so much for your happiness as it is for your holiness, that God uses the marriage to actually shape you and to transform you. Lauri, what issues do you think surface the most in the connection you've had with couples?
I think the biggest one would be communication. I mean,
big one.
Huge is communication. I think because when you're married, you tend to know how things are going to go with a conversation, so we tend to not want to rock the boat per se. If we know it's going to be a volatile conversation, we don't want to bring things up. So unfortunately, that communication isn't there. So what a lot of people do is they don't say anything at all. So by not saying anything at all, unfortunately, that brings in frustration, it brings in resentment, because you're not saying anything about the issue or the problem, which only grows and gets bigger, and then you harbor more resentment and more frustration towards that spouse.
Yeah, 86% of couples say that communication is a major problem in their relationship. And you're right about couples being reticent to communicate because they're afraid of landmines that will go off. And, they say this and there's an explosion. They say that, there's another explosion. So there's this reticence to actually communicate, with your spouse. So are there any other issues that you think, like, you got finances, you have parenting, you've got children. What were some of the big issues that you guys struggle with in your relationship, would you say?
I would have to say that it kind of boiled down to those, was that I know for myself, just to be totally transparent, I became very self-focused.
Yeah.
And it became all about me. And, when we talk about money, when we talk about even sexual problems and all that stuff we don't want to talk about, it comes back down to that. I'm interested in me.
Versus what's best for us,
what's best
for our relationship, versus just what's best for me. Correct.
Exactly. And so I would not, as Lauri said, I got to where I would not confront the things that bothered me. So I started just holding all that stuff in until one day, it wasn't one day, it built up over time, but one day it came to surface. And it was not a very good situation at all.
Right. Okay, Lauri, how the journey to come back together. I remember us having some very significant, tearful, deep times together, bringing this thing back together. What helped you to really begin this journey back into Robert's heart, would you say?
The biggest thing I think for me would be prayer. I prayed because, like we said, when you're in that spot, when you're in a position that you're not in a good place in your relationship, I think that it's a hard place. So you want to pray, and I started praying that God would move in me, and I prayed that He would move in his heart, that He would light that fire again, that we would, feel that passion towards each other that we once felt. Because I think so many times, as if you're married a long time, that you just kind of drift and things just are the way that they are. So for me, it was a lot of prayer, a lot of focusing in on myself to see what I needed to do, how I could be a better wife. What was I doing that I wasn't being a good wife?
So really, it is a spiritual thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because, Scott Peck said, man is not so much a human being having a spiritual experience as he is a spiritual being having a human experience. It's not just two hunks of flesh in a house. Right. It's two spiritual beings in the house, and the real stuff between you guys is really spiritual. Love is spiritual. Joy is spiritual. Having peace in a relationship is spiritual. So, without God, I don't see any way, and without the influence of God and His Spirit upon the relationship, doesn't seem to be any possibility that a couple can really get to an utter fulfillment in that connection with each other. So I'm so glad that this is where you guys at in your thinking. Now, in the work you're doing with couples here, what do you got going? I know you do the high reach thing. You got a few. Tell me what you got going here. You actually ordered a bunch of the books, and I know you had a bunch of couples you guys were mentoring. Tell me about the mentoring experience, because that's what you really are. You guys are marriage mentors. Tell me about that experience.
Right. Well, it's amazing as you start to comb through that book, the light bulbs that start coming on. When you see that in couples' eyes, they were like, yes, that's us. Yes, that's us. Everything that we've mentioned here, from communication to money, couples don't think about the baggage, what's in the trunk of their car that they're bringing in. They don't talk about that. Lauri and I were talking about some of this today, this morning, about most of your marriage counseling is very superficial. They don't dig into the stuff. And as
there's a lot of nuts and bolts in this, isn't
there's
there?
a lot of nuts and bolts into this. It makes you dive into those things that they're going to hit you eventually. The wedding party is going to be over, and life is going to happen. And it's better to talk about it on the front end. And Lauri and I talked to and said, if you're scared to address some of the things before the marriage, and you're scared it's going to rock the boat too much and you won't get married, there's a problem already.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you look at a ball team, they want to have a great season, but if they don't have a great preseason,
that's right.
How in the world are they going to have a great season? So if you do a great work preseason, you can have a great work you can have a great team in the season. Mm-hmm. So, Lauri, anything on the mentoring side of things for you that you would say has really been just a wonderful experience for you? And
yeah, it really has. When we mentor couples, especially this past time when we were mentoring couples through the book, it's like he said, they really started looking at things deeper, and it really brings out a lot of the nuts and bolts of just how we communicate, some things that really help you to look at your marriage and go, oh, maybe I need to look at this a different way, a different perspective. It's so great to see it in other couples' eyes when they realize things, and they would come in and tell us they were highlighting stuff and they were trying these things and doing different things that were really making a difference in their marriage.
Yeah.
And there's one thing in there too is and it kind of ties back to what Lauri was talking about, communication. In the absence of information, we make up a story, and it's never a good story.
Right.
So when we stop communicating, I start believing these lies. She doesn't like me. She doesn't respect me. She doesn't want me around. Yeah. And the same thing with the couples we're mentoring. Mm-hmm. They have not really talked about these issues, so they've made up this whole story in their mind.
Scenario in their mind about their spouse.
That doesn't exist. So to battle that, because you asked the question, what kind of what we did, and this is one of the things. Lauri came on board before I did when we started the healing part. She was ahead of me, and she drugged me along. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I witnessed that she did that I followed on was she started teaching herself and reminding herself of truths. She had a stack of Bible verses that she read every morning, every day at lunch, every evening, and when those doubts and those things came into her life and into her mind, she started reminding herself about truth. So that's what we've also done with our mentoring, is we're bringing truth into the equation, and the lies are starting to disappear, so the healing and the growth can begin.
Marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. Well, once again, I want to thank you, Robert and Lauri, for being with us today to discuss this complicated relationship, humbling experience as it is, and sharing with our guest, your perspectives on things. So I want to remind our audience of a seminar I'll be doing on marriage. It's called Essentials Every Couple Needs for a Happy, Healthy, and Successful Relationship. It's Saturday, February the 8th from 5 to 8 p.m. and it's going to be held at the Trademark Church in Fort Worth. The cost is $30, and you get the seminar and the book. Not a bad deal. And you can go to my website or my Facebook page to register for the seminar, or you can just show up at the door. So I want to thank you for spending some time with us here. God continue His best for your life as you fulfill your unique journey on this earth.